music are you listening to now? Do you listen to new music?
I don't really listen to new music. If something catches my ear, I don't listen to new metal bands. I don't listen and go, give me the top 10 of the new metal bands.
Justin Bieber?
Who the Justin Bieber?
Good. I like that answer. That's perfect.
From the earliest days of his rise with Black Sabbath, Ozzy Osbourne wasn't just known for his wild stage antics and otherworldly vocals. He was also known for sniffing out what he considered phony. And there was one global rock icon, he believed, embodied everything fake about the music business: David Bowie. While the world adored Bowie for his constant reinvention, flashy personas, and genre-bending art, Ozzy didn't see a visionary. He saw a poser. "He was fake as fire," Ozzy once grumbled backstage during an unfiltered moment recalled by a former tour manager. "Always in costume, always playing some character. Who the hell is the real David Bowie?" That question haunted Ozzy, who had built his entire identity around rawness and vulnerability. While Bowie danced through alter egos like Ziggy Stardust and the Thin White Duke, Ozzy stumbled on stage bleeding, screaming, and often high out of his mind, an open wound in leather and eyeliner. He believed rock wasn't about theater, it was about truth, and Bowie, to Ozzy, represented artifice. They crossed paths numerous times, at awards shows, label dinners, and shared stages, but there was always a chill in the air. No shouting, matches, just tension. Sharon Osbourne later hinted that Ozzy felt like Bowie got a free pass from the industry. Critics called Bowie innovative, while Ozzy's work was branded as barbaric or mentally unstable. "It pissed him off," she once said. Ozzy was living through hell, and people clapped harder for the guy wearing makeup and shoulder pads. What deepened the grudge was how frequently the media compared the two. Both British, both eccentric, both pioneers of sound and spectacle. But in Ozzy's eyes, Bowie's chaos was calculated, while his own was real, and he resented being painted with the same brush. Even years later, Ozzy couldn't quite shake the feeling that Bowie had charmed the industry by playing it safe behind glitter and personas. "He made it look easy," Ozzy muttered in a 1998 radio interview, "and that just pissed me off." When Bowie passed away in 2016, tributes flooded the world from artists and fans alike. Ozzy's statement was short. "A legend, sure, but we were never close. No warmth, no nostalgia, just a quiet nod of respect from one icon to another, with the heavy pause of a grudge that never fully dissolved." In the end, Ozzy never publicly attacked Bowie the way he did others. But those who knew him best say, Bowie's name always brought a sigh, a wince, or an eye roll. Maybe it was artistic jealousy, or maybe it was a rejection of what Ozzy saw as glam rock's smoke and mirrors. Either way, Bowie wasn't someone Ozzy admired. He was someone Ozzy endured. And for a man who built his life on the raw chaos of truth, that silent judgment cut deeper than any headline ever could. If there's one thing Ozzy Osbourne never did, it was sugarcoat his opinions. And when asked point-blank about one of the most successful American rock acts of the 1980s, Ozzy didn't hold back. "Van Halen?" he scoffed in an early 90s interview. "They're the worst fucking band in the world." It was a comment that stunned fans considering Van Halen's global fame, technical brilliance, and massive record sales. But to Ozzy, none of that mattered. He didn't care about Eddie Van Halen's blazing guitar solos or David Lee Roth's acrobatics. He found their music loud, sure, but soulless. He once remarked that watching Van Halen live was like watching a gymnastics show with a soundtrack. Ozzy hated flash, he hated polish, and Van Halen, in his mind, represented everything wrong with the arena rock era: big hair, bigger egos, and no emotional depth. The rivalry wasn't just about taste, it was personal. In 1978, when Van Halen opened for Black Sabbath on tour, Ozzy reportedly felt blindsided by their energy. Roth would leap across the stage, Eddie would shred endlessly, and the crowd, many of them too young to know Sabbath's legacy, ate it up. Ozzy didn't take it well. Backstage, he allegedly referred to the band as a circus act in spandex, while other members of Sabbath warned their management that Van Halen was stealing their thunder. Years later, Ozzy admitted to feeling threatened. "They were loud, fast, and American. We were tired, old, and British," he said with a laugh. But the sting was real. Van Halen's rise coincided with Sabbath's internal decline. Substance, abuse, lineup changes, and label issues. And as Ozzy watched Van Halen climb the charts with hit after hit, he felt like the torch was being passed to a band he didn't respect. And things didn't improve with time. Even after Ozzy launched a wildly successful solo career, he continued to take jabs at Van Halen in interviews. When asked in 2005 about the prospect of collaborating with any 80s rock legends, Ozzy quipped, "As long as it's not Van Halen, I'd rather eat my own shoe." While the two bands never directly clashed on record, the hostility lingered for years. Sharon Osbourne reportedly blocked attempts to book both Ozzy and Van Halen on the same festival bill. And in 2008, when rumors swirled about a possible joint, Sharon shut it down fast. "Over my dead body," she told a promoter. To Ozzy, music wasn't about showing off. It was about connecting. And he never felt that from Van Halen. He saw them as all style, no soul. Loving these raw rock and roll revelations? Then do us a favor. Hit that like button, subscribe for more Hollywood music bombshells, and drop a comment below. Whose feud should we expose next? Even today, fans debate whether Ozzy's beef with Van Halen was rooted in genuine dislike or bruised ego. But one thing is clear. No matter how many guitar magazines called Eddie a genius, or how many crowds screamed for Roth's high kicks, Ozzy never gave them his blessing. To him, Van Halen wasn't revolutionary. They were loud, overhyped, and missing the one thing he cared about most: heart. There are feuds in rock that simmer beneath the surface, and then there are ones that explode, loud, messy, and impossible to ignore. Ozzy Osbourne's contempt for Motley Crue's frontman, Vince Neil, falls firmly in the latter category. Though both artists rose to fame in the explosive world of glam-infused metal, Ozzy never saw Vince Neil as a peer. He saw him as a leech. He was always loud, always drunk, and always talking Ozzy once said of Neil in a 2001 interview. Their beef dated back to the early 1980s, when Motley Crue was tapped to open for Ozzy on his Bark at the Moon tour. What began as a professional arrangement quickly devolved into a backstage circus. Vince Neil, known for his wild antics and constant partying, reportedly clashed with Ozzy almost immediately. Crew members recounted moments where Ozzy would quietly walk off after Neil entered a room, muttering "bloody idiot" under his breath. Ozzy, despite his own chaotic reputation, had a serious side when it came to music and legacy. He believed in earning respect through staying power and sincerity. Neil, to Ozzy, represented none of that. In fact, Ozzy often described Motley Crue as a bunch of clowns in eyeliner pretending to be dangerous. Their tour together became infamous for one particular incident, never officially confirmed, but often whispered about in roadie circles, where Ozzy allegedly refused to go on stage until Neil was kept out of his dressing room. According to one source, Ozzy told his manager, "If he comes in here with another bottle and that bloody smirk, I'll throw him off the balcony." Whether hyperbole or not, the tension was real. Vince Neil, for his part, never kept quiet. Over the years, he took jabs at Ozzy's vocal style, his age, and even his marriage to Sharon. Once joking on stage, "The only one who controls Ozzy more than Sharon is gravity." Ozzy didn't respond publicly, but insiders say he kept a blacklist, and Vince's name was underlined. The friction escalated in the late 90s when talks began about a heavy metal super tour featuring multiple rock legends. Ozzy allegedly shut it down when he learned Neil might be involved. "I'm not sharing a stage with that brat," he was quoted saying during a production meeting. Fans were disappointed, but those behind the scenes understood. Some wounds don't heal with time. And perhaps the most telling moment came during an episode of The Osbournes, where a fan asked Ozzy if he'd ever do a song with Vince Neil. His answer? A blank stare, followed by a muttered, "Not even if hell freezes over." Despite their similarities, both rock front men, both survivors of addiction, both symbols of their era, Ozzy saw Vince as everything he wasn't. Shallow, opportunistic, and undeserving of the platform he stood on. And for Ozzy, that was unforgivable. While the world remembers the madness of their shared tours, few fans ever realized just how deep Ozzy's disdain ran. For him, Vince Neil was never just a rival. He was a stain on a genre Ozzy helped create. When Ozzy Osbourne spoke about the soul of rock and roll, he always returned to the same principle: authenticity. It wasn't about flawless vocals or arena-sized crowds. It was about telling the truth, even if your voice cracked while doing it. That's why, out of all his unspoken rivalries, his quiet disdain for Phil Collins remains one of the most telling. On paper, the two couldn't have been more different. Ozzy, the dark prince of heavy metal, clawed his way out of Birmingham with grit, grime, and enough drugs in his system to take down a rhino. Collins, meanwhile, went from drumming for Genesis to becoming one of the most commercially successful solo acts of the 80s. His smooth ballads topped charts worldwide, and his clean-cut, everyman persona made him a darling of mainstream radio. But to Ozzy, that was the problem. He believed Collins represented everything that had diluted rock music in the 1980s, music that was too safe, too sanitized, and too desperate for radio play. "He's not rock," Ozzy reportedly sneered during a post-show interview in 1986. "He's a fucking greeting card with a drum kit." Though the quote never made it to print, it became infamous among those in Ozzy's circle. What fans never knew is that there had once been industry pressure for the two to collaborate, back when Ozzy was experimenting with synth-heavy production. In the late 80s, a top executive reportedly suggested Phil Collins as a guest producer on one of Ozzy's albums. Ozzy's reaction? He walked out of the meeting. "If he touches one of my tracks," he said later, "I'll bury the whole record." To Ozzy, the idea of letting someone like Collins into his creative world was sacrilege. It wasn't just personal, it was philosophical. Collins, in Ozzy's eyes, didn't just make soft music. He betrayed the rebellious roots of rock. Even worse, Ozzy hated how the press fawned over Collins. Every magazine called him a genius, a crossover star, a master of reinvention. Meanwhile, Ozzy, who had outlived scandals, lawsuits, and near-death experiences, was still being treated like a madman instead of a pioneer. It stung. In a 1991 radio appearance, Ozzy was asked to list artists he respected. Without hesitation, he rattled off names like Lemmy Kilmister, Iggy Pop, and even Axl Rose. Then the DJ mentioned Collins. Ozzy just laughed. "That guy," he said, "he's rocked the way elevator music is jazz." The rivalry never turned into a public feud. There were no diss tracks, no lawsuits, but those closest to Ozzy say the disdain never faded. When Collins played Live Aid in both London and Philadelphia on the same day, Ozzy rolled his eyes. "Of course he did," he said sarcastically. "Man probably flew coach too. He's got it all figured out." What fans don't realize is that to Ozzy, selling out wasn't just about money. It was about abandoning the pain, the fire, the rebellion that gave rock its meaning. And Phil Collins, for all his commercial brilliance, was the final straw. In a decade Ozzy already hated. He didn't see him as a musician. He saw him as the guy who smoothed out every rough edge Ozzy fought to keep jagged. And for that, Collins earned a quiet place on Ozzy's personal blacklist, a place reserved. Not for enemies, but for those who betrayed the very spirit of the music that saved him.